at 7:30 in the municipal complex. Pursuant to Sections 13 of the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of the time and place of this regular meeting has been provided by prominently displaying the schedule of regular meetings on the official notice board in the municipal complex and by transmitting a copy of this schedule to the Princeton Packet, Town Topics, the Trenton Times, the Trentonian, and to Comcast Cable of New Jersey, Inc. A copy was also filed with the clerk of Princeton. I'd like to call the roll, please.
Mr. Cohen?
Here.
Ms. Coulson?
Here.
Mr. Davitt?
Here.
Mr. Floyd?
Here.
Mr. Shriver?
Yes.
Mr. Tannenbaum?
Yes.
Mr. Valvanis?
Here.
Ms. Chen?
Here.
Ms. Perron-Lambrose?
Here.
Mr. Stein? Thank you.
Okay. We have one resolution. I think everybody's got a copy in their packet. It's case number is Z 1919-692, 133 to 135 John Street, Block 17.03, Lot 116. Have you read the copy of it, and are there any corrections, comments? Somebody like to make a motion?
Move approval.
Okay,
Sure, I'll second it.
okay. Claudia?
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Ms. Chen?
Yes.
Ms. Perron-Lambrose?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, now I guess the question is, we have on our agenda, we have listed two hearings this evening. 96 Fleming Way and 33 Lafayette.
Yes, sir.
I understand that one is, it will not be heard tonight?
96 Fleming Ways, notice was defective, so they're going to renotice and be on the next
So we carry
meeting in
to
October.
The next
Yeah.
meeting, okay. All right, if there's anybody here for that hearing, it won't be heard tonight, okay? All right, so the first hearing would be case Z 1919-764, 33 Lafayette, Block 5.01, Lot 10 in the R1 zone.
The noticing is in order, and the board has jurisdiction. And I'll swear you in now, Mr. Bridger. Do you swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. The applicant, Thomas Majdansky, is the owner of 33 Lafayette Road and is seeking C1 and C2 variance relief to permit the construction of 3 dormers on the back of the house. And these dormers are already constructed. They went through construction. A construction permit was issued, and then they realized that there was no zoning, so they came back to get zoning. And we realized that it was outside of the setbacks, so a variance is required for the dormers. So let me just go through this rest of the write-up. The property is located in the R1 zone, is subject to the use and bulk regulations in accordance with 17A, 227, and 231. Subject lot is non-complying with respect to the minimum required 20,000 square foot lot requirement. The existing is 14,000 square feet. It's also non-complying with respect to the required 125-foot lot depth. Existing is 97.75. And the house itself is non-complying with a number of setbacks. The smaller side yard setback requirement is 10. The existing is 4. The larger side yard requirement is 20. Existing is 13.8 feet. The combined side yard requirement is 30. The existing 17.8. The rear yard setback is 35, and the existing 16.4. The impervious coverage, the maximum permitted is 36, and the existing is 51. The property's had 2 variances in the past. In 2003, permit was issued and a variance was granted to approve this rear part of the house that goes back into the property line. And then there was another variance granted in 2006. If you'll notice this block on the left-hand side as you face the house, that was at one point a detached garage, and they sought variance relief to connect it to the main house and to convert that area to a bedroom, and then a garage was constructed on the other side of the house, which did not require any variances for the garage. The applicant is seeking approval of the 3 dormers on the rear elevation. They're located within the 35-foot rear yard setback. And excuse me, then they're going to expand the area. They're proposing to expand the area over the garage and connect it to the main house. They have 2 options for the garage expansion. One proposes raising the entire roof and constructing a dormer addition to expand the second floor. Alternative A maintains the existing roof line but adds a 120-foot second-story addition to the rear left corner of the garage. The space features a full bath. A portion of the raised roof proposal and the addition proposed in alternative A are located within your rear yard setback, and that's considered an increase in the degree of noncompliance. So the variance requests are as follows. The left dormer, the required setback is 35 feet. The proposed is 28 feet, 3.5 inches. The center dormer, the requirement is 35 feet. Proposal is 19 feet, 5.5 inches. And the right dormer, the proposed setback is 22 feet, 11 inches. The addition between the garage and the house also encroaches into that 35-foot setback. Its proposed setback is 34 feet, 5 inches. It also increases the existing impervious coverage from 51 to 52.5%. And the raised roof option on the garage has several setback variances. Once it's connected to the house, it becomes part of the house, and the required setback on that side is 20 feet, and the proposed is 14 feet, 4.5 inches. And there's a required 30-foot required setback, and the proposed is 17 feet, 9 inches. And it also encroaches into the rear yard setback, the 35-foot requirement, and the proposed setback is 33 foot 2. And option A, that also has a rear yard setback. It's 33 feet 8 inches. The applicant has requested consideration under both the C1 and C2 criteria. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to address them. Thank you.
Well, I have, just before we start, you have 2 alternatives. Pick one. What would you like us to hear?
We have, and we'll be presenting the one that is not called option A, but the raised roof option. It's the one that you see behind you. That's what we'll be
So
presenting.
you're not going to raise the roof, that big addition over the garage? You are or you're not?
That's
That's the one you
presentation.
want to go with?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Start.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, my name is Ryan Kennedy, attorney at Stevens & Lee for the applicant tonight. We'll have one witness, so the applicant is here tonight as well to answer any questions. Maybe before we start, if we could have our architect sworn in.
Sir, could you first state your name for the record? And if you'd raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful? Yes. Thank you.
And again, a bit of housekeeping before we start. Tonight I'll be presenting one PowerPoint presentation with numbered slides. I'll ask that we have the one item entered as a singular exhibit for the record this evening. As Mr. Bridger indicated, this is an existing house on Lafayette Street. Through some happenings, permits were pulled for dormers and constructed, and ultimately, because those portions of the house were previously approved to be in the setback, the construction of anything in that area, even if it doesn't increase or decrease the distance between the property lines, is considered essentially an increased use and does require a variance, even though, as you'll see, those dormers themselves don't actually get any closer or bring the house closer to the side yard. So that's one bucket of variances that we're requesting for those 3 rear dormers. The second, the property owner has a growing family. This is despite what maybe appears to be quite large is a three-bedroom house. They have one child and are planning for a second. The applicant's wife works quite a distance away, and they're attempting to plan for some home occupation or home office possibilities, combined perhaps with a room that could also double for family guests who come over, usually for childcare purposes, to stay above the garage. The addition would connect the garage to the main house, but otherwise stay within the same footprint, especially in terms of setbacks of that existing garage. The setback requirements change slightly because the accessory building as it is now has different setback requirements than it, as Mr. Bridger said, would if it were part of the house. But their goal is not to really do anything other than create a workspace for one of the members of the family and hopefully a place where grandparents could stay over to help from time to time. With that, I'd like to introduce our architect, Mr. Holman.
Can I ask,
Sure.
can I ask a question? On the summary of the setbacks and variances and things, the impervious coverage in both alternates would be the same, because it's still, you're still going to have the
That's correct.
connection between the house
That
and
is
the garage.
correct.
The floor area ratio that's noted on the application is 27.5%.
Well, so that's well, I don't want to predict your question, but
Well,
you've raised a good point.
Is that for the base
Well,
proposal, or is that for the alternate?
I'll let our architect answer that, but one thing I will say that I should have brought up, when this was initially brought, and for those of you who went through the application, noticed it appeared there was a request for a D floor area variance. The application asked for that. After working with staff and revising the plans, it was realized that both options were compliant for floor area. Something I had meant to point out. We do not need a D variance like the other application this morning, or not this morning, but that would have been before us this evening, and what the original application asked for. But with that, maybe I'll introduce our architect, and we can answer that
Sure.
question. And just as a formality, I know Mr. Holman's been before this board before, but I could ask him to give the 30-second version of his credentials so we could have him accepted as an expert in architecture.
My name's Eric Holterman, principal at HMR Architects here in Princeton. I've been at HMR for about 20 years. I've been a principal for about 10 years. Our work specializes in historic preservation and residential work. And we've done some other work here locally.
I'm comfortable with your qualifications. Does anybody have any questions? Okay.
So, Eric, I don't know if we want to describe the project generally, or if you want to jump right into that question while it's fresh in our minds.
Maybe a quick general explanation first, and I apologize if there's any confusion that came from including an option. The issue of the option was we struggled to see, is there a way to accommodate this design without raising the roof, because by raising the roof, we understand that we're increasing the degree of noncompliance. What we found is that it's really a much less preferable design, and in fact, which is why we're presenting raising the roof, because we believe that's really a much better design and also serves the client's needs better. So that's why we're presenting that, so that as we're going through this, as Ryan said, we'll concentrate on the raised roof option, which does include a degree of increase in degree of noncompliance at the setback at that far right side.
Would that change the floor area ratio?
And so the floor area ratio is slightly different. We calculated the floor area ratio for this one, which is the worst case. This option.
27.5%?
Yes.
That's the situation now?
It is, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Steve, can I add something? Excuse me. This lot's small, and I know that you realize this, but I just want the board to know. It's the proportional FAR, due to the small lot size, brings the FAR up to like 32.4%. So 32.4%. That, yeah. So
Okay.
Right.
they don't need an FAR variance.
Yeah. So originally, we thought that we had an issue with FAR, and then Derek reminded us of the proportional FAR, which made a big difference.
Okay.
So Eric, just as we look at our cover slide here, maybe just quickly explain the coloring and maybe point out the proposed elevation that we're looking at.
So the blue area shows the addition, the raised roof, and a dormer at the back that also gives us enough headroom for a staircase going up into the space. Plus, there's a little gap now between the main house and the garage. So we're filling that in so that you can get from the first floor up a staircase into the space above the garage without going outdoors. Raising the roof does not penetrate the height setback ratio. We're still underneath that from the side yard.
Here on slide 2, I can just point out to you that on the left it shows where we are within the Princeton municipality, and then is that a blown-up view on the right, Eric, of the neighborhood?
Yes, yes.
This next slide is an overhead overview, I suppose, of the building as it is, or as it was recently when this photo was taken by whatever satellites that we subscribe to. If you could just point out maybe the streets that are around here, if you can, just to orient the...
Right, so Lafayette is the street that's running diagonally across the bottom left. And just off the bottom of that slide then would be the traffic circle. And then, so this really points out how the house is pretty tight on a smaller site. However, it's not closer to the street. It actually meets all the street frontage requirements, the front yard requirements from the street. Which is why in our design then again, we really tried not to make any significant changes of the view of the building from the street.
Switching to the next slide, I think we zoomed out a little bit with the tax map. This shows the roads in the surrounding area, Hodge and Cleveland and Library Place. With that, I'll ask you to take us through what we're looking at on this next slide.
So it's a roof plan. On the right side is the proposed raised roof addition with the newly constructed link between the existing garage and the existing house. On the left, the shaded areas show the 3 dormers that were added. The 2 dormers on the rear addition were shown on our drawings, went to the construction. It was all approved, permitted, and they built them. During construction later on, we decided we'd actually like to add that 3rd dormer on the back. We revised our plan, sent them in again, and that's when it was noticed that, in fact, that they increased the degree of noncompliance of that portion of the building in the setback, so that we understood we needed a variance for those dormers. So all 3 of those dormers actually have been constructed already.
And Eric, do those dormers go any further than the edge of the roof line?
They do not. Okay. No, they don't go any further than the roof line, and they're obviously not as high as the top of the roof either.
And being on the site, I'm sure much more than you would like as this project has continued. They're certainly not visible from the street, but is there any impact that you can describe to the neighboring property?
So you can't see them at all from the street, and also, as you saw on the previous slide, the sort of the 3D photographic view is that the perimeter of the site is actually very well screened from the neighbors. So in fact, even from the neighbors, it's difficult to see those dormers.
And then moving to the right side of the garage portion of the project.
So the roof edge, the roof eave, which you see on the when you look at the elevation, the sort of the gutter line of the roof is raised 3 feet from where it is, so that it's not a full second story added onto the garage. It's added on so that the plate height, that is the top of the knee wall, would be at about 3 feet, and then we would match the existing roof slope of the existing building roofs, sloping up towards the top, hipped from all 4 sides. However, with another dormer on the top left, the sort of rear left of the garage, and the height there is specifically to accommodate the staircase coming up from the first floor. And in this slide, then you can see roof in its raised, dormers are halfway on the wall and then halfway up into the roof, again, because we have that low plate height. And on the left side of the garage, you can see the dormer in the back, which accommodates the stair, and that matches a dormer that's opposite it on the left side, the left of the gap, which is an existing dormer at the house.
The front elevation is not the elevation you're proposing, though. The front elevation here is the lower roof.
No, this is the higher roof. This is the taller roof.
Okay, so the alternate on sheet A200A,
So actually, if we go to the next, I'm sorry, if you, go back, Brian. So if you look at the upper elevation
yeah,
there, that's showing the existing condition.
right.
And so the roof actually is being raised
So
here.
you're
in this-
raising, so it's not the elevation you proposed on this. This sheet has a roof, has a large box over the rear of the garage. the front.
Yes. Yeah,
And-
and that box, viewed from the elevation, looks exactly like that. Because you're only looking at the cheek wall of the side of that box plus the side of
It's
the
a
roof.
different elevation, but what you're proposing is what's on the slide here, not what's on the drawing. The front portion of the roof on the slide continues up to the elevation of the addition.
Is it possible that you printed the?
I'm sorry, see that drawing says 200A?
Yes?
All the drawings that have A are the alternate, and that's the one we're not proposing. And I apologize for the confusion.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right, I'm sorry, continue on.
No need to apologize. That's,
So it's the upper one? Is this, is that it?
The upper
The
one
drawings
is
that do not have an A after the number are the ones that we're looking at.
So it's just looking at it. The SPs then? This is the first couple pages.
Is it the first couple pages, the one that says SP? Is that is the correct one?
This appears
this
to be
one.
the correct
Yeah,
elevation.
so up
And that's
until
on SP1.
SP, yeah? The rest of these are all A's.
And also on A200. Is that right?
So if you look at drawing SP1, the proposed is the upper drawing on SP1 and not the
And
lower
also
drawing.
A200 is the...
And then A200 is the correct
Okay.
proposed front
200 is
elevation.
correct.
Okay. All right. Okay.
In this slide, you can see the lower image showing the infill of the space between the existing garage and the existing house, stair rising up at the rear, and then that stair at the second level rising up inside of that box at the back left up to a single room above the garage, which also includes a bathroom.
We don't have
And
it,
on the-
right? We have it just on the screen, right?
Is, on your larger plan, that is shown on sheet A100.
And A200 represents the elevation from the front and the box, let's call it over the garage in the rear.
Correct. That's right. No. This slide more points out again the 3 dormers, which I mentioned already. And the site plan on the right side reiterates all the setback dimensions, which are not changing.
Since maybe one of the board members may ask about it, while not shown on this plan, could you just describe where the home has its HVAC air conditioning units now?
So if you look at this slide, at the middle blue arrow, sort of that L recess at the rear of the house has 2 3-by-3-foot pads for air conditioning compressors and 1 3-foot-by-5-foot pad for an emergency generator against the walls of that L.
And I guess under the new code, it's a 5-foot setback. Are these all well outside of that 5-foot setback?
Right.
While we're looking at this slide, Eric, could you talk a little bit about what's happening now between the garage and the main house? I know it was flagged in the calculations that addition would be new impervious coverage, but maybe you could talk about exactly how pervious it is now.
Right. So when we originally calculated for the coverage, we calculated the first floor, the driveway, garage, rear patio, front patio, and walkways, and we actually missed that gap in between the house and the garage. We didn't count it as impervious coverage, even though it turns out it does have some bluestone pieces laying in there, which are essentially impervious. So now that we're filling that in with building, there actually isn't any actual real change in the amount of impervious. However, in the calculation, we added that into the calculation.
You're saying the impervious was actually 52.5%?
Yes.
And it's staying,
And it's
obviously
staying the same.
now.
Correct.
So
Okay.
you're not, that new, I don't mean to call it that connection space will not increase, it's not no bigger than the current impervious coverage is now?
That's correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So right now, you're saying the only variance you're looking for are rear yard setback variances?
Correct.
Yeah, on essentially on both sides, but yeah. And the side yard, there is because the accessory structure of a garage becomes part of the house, that change it, while we're not actually physically changing the location or size of it, that does
In your
require.
list here, you're not listing the side yard setback as a variance.
Well, so,
It's just no change. It was previously approved, right?
and when we say that the list, this is from the cover page of the plans, the zoning bulk table?
The only variance you're looking for now would be rear setback variances, right?
I think we need the side yard variance because the garage was previously approved as an accessory building.
Yes.
But it's a prior,
It's
was
a prior
previously
approval.
approved.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But now it's
Yeah.
becoming part of the
Yeah.
primary structure.
Okay.
In fact, I think when Derek broke it down with us, it sounds quite extensive, but, we have up on the screen here the 3 dormer variances. Again, while we're not expanding where the roof or the house is, those are the new distances for those dormers, essentially. And then the addition of the garage, we've still listed, and we noticed for a coverage variance, whether it's needed or not. We'd like to, have the record reflect the actual coverage now, certainly. And I'll ask Eric to explain the rear setback. There's a slight change from that, but it really is a function of the,
If you want to go back just one slide, the one that has the blue arrows.
Gentlemen, you're managing to confuse the hell out of me this evening. I think Steve was pretty clear in saying, what is it you're asking for? He asked you 3 separate times what kind of variances you're asking for. Do you need a minute to communicate amongst each other to figure out whether you want the Cs or what it is you're looking for? Because right now, it's psychobabble, and it's very difficult to follow. So in an effort to help you get the variances, I'd like to have a clear understanding of what specifically it is you're looking for at this point. You've given us an application with options. You've come in telling us, oh, well, we forgot something for impervious. This is one of the most disorganized presentations we've seen in the last 10 years on this board. Can you please clearly let us know what you're looking for so we can then discuss it and hopefully give it to you?
On the screen, you will see the list of variances that have been identified as being needed. For the 3 dormers, those are the setbacks from side and rear yards that are required. For the garage connection, you've got the impervious coverage that we are in the process of explaining, as well as the rear yard setback for the garage.
So the impervious coverage, which is being requested, is not necessary. Have I understood you said before?
I think that I said it was not a necessary, but I think it should be included. What's there now are some flagstones that are impervious, but we did not count them as impervious because there is some space around them. We didn't include it with our other walkways. I agree that we should have. However, I think that it makes sense for us to include that as impervious coverage in our application now,
And
per these numbers.
I mean, when you get into gravel and fieldstone, it's technically impervious coverage. I mean, if you look on the survey that was included in the package, it pretty much outlines the area that they're proposing the connection to be. So it's 1%. I don't think it's a huge deal. I mean, I don't think it's an actual 1% increase in impervious coverage. It's probably a fraction of that because there's a little bit of space between the bluestone, but it is a slight increase.
One other question. On your application, you have the left side setback existing as 2 foot 6 inches. On your survey, it's 4 feet.
From the survey, it's 4 feet.
So the original application was based on the architect's drawings. After submitted, Mr. Bridger asked us to submit a survey, and the notice and numbers that are before you are based on the survey numbers rather than our original architectural submission.
So the 4 feet is accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. Sorry, keep going.
And I think where we had left off in the last variances, and I thought to keep it concise for you, this is pasted from Derek's memo because there were I agree completely, the variances initially requested versus, and I want to thank staff, 1, for helping us, and 2, in getting this deemed complete in the time that they did. I had another application was going to be here tonight that was unable to make the newspaper and not get on. This one we were able to get on in the paper and noticed for this evening. We're very appreciative of staff for turning things around as quickly as they did for that. I thought it would have been simpler to present them in the way that the memo was, and that explains the side yard setback changes, not from the perspective of physical changes, but from the perspective of what is required when that garage is now part of the house with different numbered setback requirements than the freestanding accessory structure had.
Right.
So I'll represent to the board and apologize again for the confusion, but the variances listed in front of you or above you and in Mr. Bridger's memo are the ones we notice for and the ones we believe are necessary for this project.
And if I could ask, on the raised roof option, I think you explained, it's not extending the encroachment. It's just building up within the same lines. So yes, it increases some bulk, but it's not encroaching.
That is correct.
Yes, yes.
So the existing is the same as the proposed.
That is correct.
The floor area ratio changes, just because we're enclosing additional space.
It does.
Yeah, but we're proportional FAR, as you said.
It remains well. I think with 32 is where we could go. It would be considerably higher than the request here.
Okay.
So with
I
the-
have a question about the dormers. I guess just a very basic question of what is the intent of the zoning that we're considering that would say that we would be, what I heard one of you say is that they're not visible, but I'm not sure that that's what the zoning is really addressing. So I would want to know what we're considering. Why would we say yes or no about the dormers? What are they?
Well, when you brought up the issue with the dormers, you know, you showed that slide and said the dormers aren't visible, you know, from the adjacent properties. And, you know, but the addition over the garage, that back addition is certainly visible. So,
Certainly.
and the height of the roof of the garage is increasing substantially. Okay.
But what about the dormers?
The existing dormers? I mean, these new that were built?
The ones that we're retroactively considering, I guess. Is it something beyond whether or not people can see them?
Well, I think the fact that they might be seen from the adjacent property, I mean, in the rear, but I don't know what impact it would have on them because the roof line itself, the addition,
They're within the roof line.
the addition is further out than that, so the dormers,
So, but why are we even looking at them then?
because
Why are we even
they
concerned?
built them without approval, or, excuse me, they had an approval, but they required a variance, and they did not apply for a variance at the time.
maybe I'm hearing what the planning question, the planning reason for, and I'm not a planner, so I'm not going to testify to this, but I'll point out, you know, in the neighborhood scheme, or the neighborhood character ordinance, some effort was made to understand the effect of dormers on certain things, including height to setback ratios. That's a way to determine or gauge the effect of a structure on a roof as it relates to neighbors. And there was a lot of thought put into instances where dormers could actually cut into that height to setback ratio, I think in recognition that that type of addition has a lesser impact than a full structure would. Now, that's not a piece that was addressed in looking at that. They looked at fire escapes, they looked at dormers, they looked at some other elements that could cut into height to setback ratio, which may even have more impact visually on a neighbor than just the setback. Admittedly, I don't know if that came up or was addressed, but I think there's some recognition, at least in some things that have been worked on recently with the ordinance, that smaller vertical protrusions out of roof, through a roof are less impactful. And then I'm going to, before someone accuses me of planning testimony, I'm going to probably stop. But I will point that out. I mean, if to the extent that that was your question, maybe that helps point you in a direction.
I'm still not sure why they were out of, why we would, if they weren't already there, why would we be concerned about them being out of compliance? I mean, you're saying they're actually better than if it was a full raising the roof. Maybe,
Just to revisit what Ryan said about the neighborhood character, I think there was an effort and thought went into exempting dormers from the height to setback, because I think the general consensus was it's better to go up than it is to go out and, you know, build a bigger footprint and more environmental impact, impervious coverage. So
right.
for whatever reason, they exempted them from the height to setback line, but they didn't exempt them from the setback itself. So that's a bit of a disconnect. We need to go back and look at that when we revisit the round two of the neighborhood character. I mean, I think there's an argument to be made if you exempt it from the height to setback, which has the most visual impact on a neighboring property. If you're going to allow that to occur, what about the setback? So, I mean, there's discussion about that, but it hasn't, nothing's been done.
Okay, so it sounds like it's, I'm not crazy to
No,
assert.
no,
Okay,
you
I found
you
that
caught
out
the
again.
issue,
Good.
yes.
Okay.
If you look at A100, if you didn't raise the roof, how much room would there be in that? Could you still put a bedroom above the garage?
Because of the roof slope at the rear, it's hipped all four ways. We couldn't get the stair up without doing something something to increase some headroom at the sloped roof in order to get the stairway up. The alternate scheme, shows that roof where it is, and it's actually much smaller. You have much smaller room up there.
And so your intent really is architecturally to make it blend with the other side of the house,
Oh, absolutely, yes.
with that addition and,
But architecturally, the other side of the house is a one-story former garage that was redone, and now this is a, visually is a very big addition over the garage.
I would mention, though, that the addition for the stair is set back, well set back from the front wall of the garage.
Oh, from the front
Again.
wall, but the roof line has increased substantially.
Correct.
And from the rear elevation, where you said before that the visual impact of the dormers had no effect on the neighbors, but this addition of the stair in the back is a big box back there, basically.
And the height, the overall height, again, as shown in the chart, is 26. 35 is allowed, and this is within the setback area.
again, just because I can't tell from the drawings, how many feet are you actually raising that roof?
The ridge, the gutter line, the eave line is raised just 3 feet, and the ridge is raised about 5.
And you're adding 2 dormers.
And adding 2 dormers to the front, yes. And again, I mean, I think that the 2 dormers on the front actually works with the rest of the house.
I have a couple of questions. What is this space being used for now?
It's just attic space now.
Okay.
Unused, unheated, and unfinished.
Okay, and when you intend to convert it to living space, would you put in cooking and toilet space as well?
No plan for cooking, just a bathroom.
A bathroom?
Yeah.
Okay. So then the question for Mr. Bridger, would this qualify either for a detached or accessory dwelling or for a flat?
Not under the current ordinance. They don't have the required lot area in the former borough. You can have an accessory dwelling. It can either be in the main house or detached, but you need 25% greater lot area. It's like the case we had on Battle Road. So if the lot area is 20,000, they would need 25,000 square feet to make that happen without a variance. But they're deficient in lot area. Their lot area is around 14,000 square feet. So,
Thank you.
yes, sir.
Unless we have any other questions for our architect, that is absent a summary after the wave of people from the public speak. That's our case in chief.
Anybody else has any?
I have one other question, I'm sorry. On SP1, what is that little triangle on the, next to the garage on the left?
Can we go back to the 3D view, the 3D, oh,
This?
I don't think it's clear enough there. Let's go to the roof plan. Yeah. So, on the, you're able to see this slide, right? So the stair that we're adding here, So the height of this roof matches the height of this dormer. And that's what you're seeing from the street.
Oh, okay.
This roof is actually much higher, and that's the pyramid that you see in the back that rises up even further.
So you're
We don't have
seeing
anything to do with that one. That one was done.
That's part of the existing house.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, I guess we'll see if there's no one, it appears to be no one in the public to speak, so we'll close the public portion of the hearing. Do you want to,
Just briefly, and thank you, and again, the way this came together, I agree with you completely and apologize for any confusion, one, between the different options, the initial application, which we, have to provide copies of to everyone, even if it's changed during review, asked for a D variance, ultimately, with working with Sept, thankfully realized that was not necessary, that there was, floor area to spare and then some. But the variances here, one result out of an unfortunate timing situation, but in a de minimis situation where I think you'll see that the town's code is attempting to recognize the up versus out situation, where in a case like this where there is very little, if any, negative impact to the neighbors from the dormers, just the way the house is oriented. And then the positive elements of being able to, get the groceries in and without going outside, as well as the ability to potentially work from home when a new child comes and have a space for house guests. Thank you.
I actually thought of a question. I understand if there's more impervious surface that could cause some water problems, but does a taller, bigger structure have any impact in that way, or not really?
it's a bigger roof, so you'll have a little more runoff from the roof, but I don't think there's any, I don't think the additional size of the roof would create any major drainage problems.
That's a good point. We'll have to catch that on the next revision of the impervious coverage.
Yeah, I mean, basically, as you said, the impervious coverage said it stayed the same. You're just building up. I mean, you're really taking advantage of the, let's call it the whole building envelope. And I think it increases the visual bulk of the house as you look at it from the street. I mean, I remember the house from way back when, with when the garage was on the left and there was nothing on the right. And now it's, when you look at the slide you showed before it was an aerial view of the neighborhood. And, I mean, when you look at the overall size of the house on the lot, it's imposing. But, again, this is just in plan. Now you're just bringing it up. You're elevating it even further. So. Comments? Any comments from anyone? None? Okay. All right, so let's make sure we're approving the variances as noted on the slide that you showed on the screen.
And I'll represent that those match and were taken directly from the zoning memo as well. So if they wanted to go off that list, if there's more confidence in that than my handiwork, I would understand.
Okay. All right. Okay. I think there's a lot going on here, to be honest with you. I think it's, you're really, in my opinion, you've really maxed this lot out. I mean, maybe even gone a little bit beyond what it should be, but it does comply with the exception of, the exception of some height areas you're asking for, which are compliant, but I think it's really taking this to an extreme.
Can we request some special consideration in that it has already been way over the impervious surface limit? Is there something that we might want to add to this to ask for some, some compensation for that? Some rain garden or whatever kind of thing might make a difference. I don't know if there are problems there now or...
I don't know if there are any drainage problems on the lot. I mean,
You could have a condition that the plan be reviewed by the land use engineer, and if he determines the need for stormwater management, then the applicant would, have to work with him.
Is it connected to the storm sewer now, the downspouts?
Right now, the leaders go underground, but we can't tell. The house changed hands fairly recently. We don't know where those underground leaders go. They don't run out on the surface.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I do like Derek's suggestion. There's no neighbors talking about existing problems, but present tense, if it can be reviewed, that would be,
Yeah.
go to what you're saying.
I think it would be the responsible thing to do right now.
to what now?
Yeah, there was always this question in my mind is, although these little bit of changes, how much is too much? Where does the line get drawn? The increase in impervious coverage is de minimis. It's
Right.
close to nothing, but it's still, over, and some of the others. But I think the impact of this proposal is not great at all. But again, as was pointed out by Steve, it's pretty much maxed out now. Even though, you might come back with a little more, at some point, somebody might draw.
And
Well, at a certain level, it equals most of the surrounding houses too that have all maxed out their property.
Yeah, but we also have to respect the code. If we don't respect the code, who does?
I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just saying everybody living over there seems to have tried to max out their property, so.
The ones surrounding it seem to have a lot more space than what we saw.
Well, while agreeing with what has been said before, I think the plans look good. That dead space in between the garage and the house, it makes sense to capitalize on that and use it. Building up is embracing what we, as a township, and what our legislature has said we should be doing. I'm okay with this. It has my support, and it doesn't seem to be. I absolutely get what you're saying, but and that creep has always bugged me. When we go up, okay, we'll go up 2% this time, we'll go up 3% that time, but I don't think we're doing anything. We're not increasing it, it seems, in this matter. So.
Okay. Any other comments?
I move we approve the project
With the variances
with the variances
as
that are.
shown?
As C1? C1 or C2? I know, no, it's okay, Mr. Kennedy. You didn't bring a planner tonight, so I think for the board, it's really a question of, do you feel these, the variances are required or originally are the result of the lot size and dimensions of the lot versus the purposes that we normally would see for C2, which is it's an appropriate way of using the property, air, light, and space. So it's two different ways of looking at it. The C1 presumes there's a hardship here, and that becomes the basis for the variance. The C2 says, nah, you don't have to prove hardship. We'll just look at some other reason for approving the variance.
Well, I mean, I think it's up to the applicant to tell us.
Well,
because
the applicant didn't bring a planner, and I understand that they have asked for, both C1 and C2.
And not to play that role, but this is an undersized lot. The footprint of the structure was existing in this location, and to do anything like this, or really any change to the structure, requires these types of variances. So most of these variances are, I know technically, I do have to use the word hardship, and that may not seem to fit here, but because it is an undersized lot with an existing home in this place, to do these expansions does require this. And so under C1, I'd ask you to consider it that way. As from the C2 more flexible perspective, you did hear about the applicant's plan to make the home more modern. It's an odd-shaped home and an undersized lot to fit in the amenities that a growing family needs. This is what you end up having to do on this site with the house that's there. And that is the more flexible C2 variance, that it's a planning, kind of more of a good planning, that the goals of the township to have a more modern space and home with existing stock that is here, that drives the variance. So we asked for either, and I asked that no, never mind.
I can support a C1. I think a C2 is amazingly subjective. And I couldn't defend it on the next application. Someone comes and says, well, I need.
As almost always, I agree with Mr. Floyd.
All right, so we're going to approve it as a C1. Or we're going to review it as a C1.
And do you want the condition that Ms. Colson was discussing, that the plan needs to be submitted to the land use engineer for drainage review?
I think we should have our engineer look at it.
And the applicant is okay with that as a condition, so.
Yeah. Did we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Gloria?
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Coulson?
Yes.
Mr. Davich?
Yes.
Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Shriver?
Yes.
Mr. Tannenbaum?
Yes.
Mr. Valvanis?
Yes.
Thank you, it's approved.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have a resolution that I think was distributed to the board. Do you all have a copy of it?
I don't think I have that.
Do you have a copy of the resolution that was distributed to go into closed session tonight? No? I saw it. Okay.